Military cargo planes are taxiing across a Berlin airfield, their bellies heavy with something more precious than weapons or aid: gold. Tons of it. Not digital certificates or paper promises, but actual bullion bars being loaded with the precision of a military operation. Germany and Italy want their gold back, $245 billion of it. This isn't a routine transfer or a scheduled audit. This is immediate repatriation, demanded not with diplomatic pleasantries but with the kind of urgency that sends jets screaming across the Atlantic. When allies start moving their most precious assets out of your vaults, that's not just a financial transaction, that's a signal. A message written in the language of gold that says trust has been broken, and the world's monetary order might be about to shift in ways we haven't seen since Bretton Woods collapsed. What you're about to discover isn't just about two countries moving their gold. It's about the beginning of the end of American financial dominance, and it's happening faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit. Let's start with the numbers, because they're staggering. Germany holds the world's second largest gold reserves. Italy ranks third. Together, these two European powers have over 1,800 tons of their national treasure sitting in the basement of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. To put that in perspective, 1,800 tons of gold is worth more than the GDP of most countries. It's a mountain of wealth that's been sitting quietly in Manhattan vaults for decades, earning trust and projecting stability in the post-war financial order. But now, both nations are demanding immediate repatriation, not in 5 years, not through gradual shipments, but now. And they're not asking nicely. German lawmakers are talking about sending cargo planes. Italian officials are weighing the political costs of leaving their gold in American hands. This isn't just about moving metal. When the world's most trusted allies start pulling their most valuable assets from your territory, that's a geopolitical earthquake. It's a vote of no confidence that echoes far beyond the financial markets. Germany's demand alone involves 1,120 tons of gold still housed at the New York Fed. That's according to Reuters. And it represents a significant portion of the nation's strategic reserves. Italy's stake is even more dramatic, 700 tons, representing 43% of their entire gold reserves, currently sits in American vaults. These aren't developing nations looking to diversify their holdings. These are NATO allies, G7 members, and cornerstone economies of the European Union. When they move, the world pays attention. What sparked this golden exodus? The answer lies in the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies that have European leaders questioning whether their assets are safe in American hands. The trigger was a series of punitive tariffs, 25% on European steel and 10% on aluminum. But in the corridors of power in Berlin and Rome, these weren't seen as routine trade measures. They were perceived as economic warfare, a weaponization of America's market access that could escalate into something far more dangerous. European officials began asking uncomfortable questions. If the United States is willing to weaponize trade relationships with its closest allies, what's to stop them from weaponizing the financial assets those allies have entrusted to American institutions? German lawmakers started voicing concerns that foreign gold holdings could be seized, collateralized, or frozen in retaliation for European policies that Washington doesn't approve of. These weren't paranoid conspiracy theories from the political fringe. These were legitimate concerns raised by mainstream politicians who remembered how quickly financial weapons could be deployed. The precedent was already there. Russian assets had been frozen after the Ukraine invasion. Iranian gold had been seized under sanctions. Chinese holdings had been threatened during trade wars. The infrastructure for financial warfare was already in place, and European leaders were beginning to wonder if they might be next. When you combine economic aggression with a demonstrated willingness to use financial assets as weapons, the logical response is to move those assets somewhere safer, somewhere you control. In Germany, the political momentum behind gold repatriation has reached a tipping point. Markus Ferber from the Christian Democratic Union has publicly warned about Trump's theocratic control over foreign reserves. This isn't coming from Germany's political fringe. This is mainstream conservative leadership questioning the reliability of American financial stewardship. Even more telling is the rare political unity emerging around this issue. The CDU is finding itself aligned with the far-right Alternative for Germany party on the question of repatriation. When German politics produces this kind of cross-party consensus, especially on an issue touching national sovereignty, that's a signal that something fundamental has shifted. The numbers backing up these concerns are stark. Reuters has confirmed that 1,120 tons of German gold still sits in New York Fed vaults. That's not just a number on a ledger, that's a substantial portion of Germany's financial sovereignty currently residing in a foreign country whose leadership is increasingly viewed as unpredictable. Italy's situation is even more complex. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni campaigned on a promise to repatriate Italian gold, but she's now walking a delicate tightrope between domestic political pressure and international diplomatic considerations. Italy's 700 tons represents 43% of the nation's total gold reserves, a concentration risk that would make any financial advisor nervous. But Meloni is being careful. She's balancing the political momentum behind repatriation with the reality that Italy needs to maintain critical trade relationships with the United States. It's a chess game played with billions of dollars in gold, where every move has both domestic and international consequences. The underlying message from both countries is clear: gold repatriation isn't just about financial diversification. It's a vote of no confidence in American stability and reliability as a custodian of other nations' most precious assets. The economic implications of coordinated European gold repatriation would ripple through the American financial system like a seismic shock. Let's break down exactly what happens when this much gold moves. First, the Treasury market. A coordinated gold pull would likely spike US 10-year Treasury yields by 5 to 6 basis points. That might sound small, but in the world of government debt, even tiny movements have massive consequences. Those higher yields would push mortgage rates past 7%, adding hundreds of dollars to monthly payments for American homebuyers and potentially triggering a housing market correction. The math is brutal. Every percentage point shift away from treasuries toward gold represents about $100 billion of lost demand for US government debt. When you're running trillion-dollar deficits and need to constantly roll over existing debt, losing that demand means higher borrowing costs across the board. But the Treasury market is just the beginning. The repo markets, the plumbing of the American financial system, would lose high-quality collateral. When banks and financial institutions can't use gold-backed instruments as collateral, they need alternatives, and those alternatives are more expensive and less reliable. The Federal Reserve would be forced to intervene more aggressively, injecting liquidity to keep funding markets stable. But every intervention exposes the underlying weakness. The system depends on foreign trust, and that trust is evaporating. The dollar itself would weaken as a reserve asset. When central banks diversify away from dollar-denominated assets toward gold, they're essentially betting against American monetary policy. Global investors would start shifting portfolios, creating a feedback loop where dollar weakness accelerates more diversification, which creates more dollar weakness. This isn't theoretical. We're already seeing early signs of stress in funding markets, and Fed officials like Lori Logan are publicly warning about unusual volatility in secured funding markets. The gold exodus would accelerate these trends exponentially. Germany and Italy aren't operating in isolation. They're part of a broader trend that's reshaping global monetary reserves, and the momentum is accelerating. The Netherlands has already moved significant portions of its gold reserves out of the United States. Austria has done the same. Belgium is considering similar moves. Poland and Switzerland are evaluating their options. What started as isolated decisions by individual countries is becoming a coordinated shift away from dollar-denominated assets stored in American institutions. The European Central Bank's latest data reveals that gold now represents over 20% of global reserves, and that percentage is rising rapidly. This isn't happening by accident. Central banks worldwide are systematically increasing their gold holdings while reducing their exposure to dollar-denominated assets. The World Gold Council surveys paint an even starker picture. 76% of central banks plan to increase their gold holdings while simultaneously cutting their dollar exposure. This represents a fundamental shift in how the world's monetary authorities view risk and reliability. Each pallet of gold flown out of American vaults represents more than just asset diversification. It's a strike against dollar dominance, a brick removed from the foundation of American financial hegemony. When your allies start treating your currency and your institutions as risks to be managed rather than assets to be embraced, that's a sign that your monetary monopoly is ending. The trend is becoming self-reinforcing. As more countries move their gold, the remaining countries feel increasing pressure to follow suit. Nobody wants to be the last one holding American assets when the music stops. The systemic threat extends far beyond the gold market itself. When central banks pull their gold from American vaults, they're removing high-quality collateral from the repo system, the overnight lending market that keeps the American financial system functioning. Less collateral means higher funding costs. Higher funding costs mean banks and financial institutions need to charge more for their services. Those higher costs get passed on to consumers and businesses, creating inflationary pressure throughout the economy. The Federal Reserve is already injecting liquidity to keep these markets stable, but every intervention reveals the underlying fragility. Fed officials like Lori Logan are publicly warning about unusual volatility in secured funding markets. They're seeing the early warning signs of a system under stress. But the most damaging indicator isn't in the markets, it's in the surveys. Recent polling shows that 70% of global reserve managers are now actively avoiding dollar-denominated assets due to concerns about American political stability. That's not just a number. That's a devastating indictment of American reliability as viewed by the world's most sophisticated financial professionals. Gold has now surpassed the euro as the world's second-largest reserve asset. When central banks start hoarding gold instead of dollars, that's a structural vote of no confidence in American monetary policy and political stability. The psychological impact is as important as the economic impact. Reserve currencies are built on faith, not force. When that faith erodes, the currency's dominance erodes with it. And right now, faith in American financial leadership is disappearing faster than gold bars flying out of New York. What we're witnessing isn't just the movement of gold, it's the movement of monetary power itself. The post-World War II financial order was built on the premise that American institutions were the safest, most reliable custodians of global wealth. That premise is now under direct assault. If the world no longer trusts American paper assets, the Federal Reserve's leverage collapses. The ability to print dollars and have the world accept them as valuable depends entirely on global confidence in American stability. When that confidence evaporates, so does America's ability to finance its deficits through foreign demand for its debt. Central banks hoarding gold represent a structural vote of no confidence in the dollar-based system. They're not just diversifying their portfolios, they're preparing for a world where American monetary policy is no longer the global standard. The dollar loses ground every time bullion flies out of America. Each departure represents a country deciding that physical control of their wealth is more important than the convenience of American financial services. It's a return to monetary nationalism that hasn't been seen since the 1970s. This shift represents strategic repositioning for a post-dollar world. Countries are building financial infrastructure that doesn't depend on American institutions, American clearinghouses, or American approval. They're creating alternatives to the dollar-based system that has dominated global finance for 8 decades. The implications are staggering. If allies don't trust American financial stewardship, how long can the dollar maintain its reserve currency status? How long can the United States finance its massive deficits through foreign demand for its debt? How long can American sanctions and financial weapons maintain their effectiveness when the world has built alternatives? Faith, not force, holds reserve currencies together. And that faith is now in free fall. The Great Gold Exodus isn't just about 2 countries moving their precious metals. It's about the end of an era, the era of unquestioned American financial dominance. We're watching the world's most trusted allies decide that American institutions are no longer trustworthy custodians of their national wealth. The question isn't whether this trend will continue, it's whether the United States will adapt to a world where its financial hegemony is no longer guaranteed. Will Washington restore faith through better policies and more reliable leadership? Or will it double down on financial weapons and economic coercion, driving even more countries toward alternatives? The next gold flight may write the next chapter of global finance. Every cargo plane that leaves American soil carrying foreign gold is also carrying away a piece of American monetary supremacy. The world is watching, the markets are responding, and the dollar's dominance is no longer a given, it's a question mark. What do you think? Are we witnessing the end of America's financial supremacy, or just a warning shot that could still be heeded? Drop your thoughts below and let's discuss whether this is the beginning of the end for the dollar-based system that has shaped global finance for the past 8 decades. Who moves first, the White House with reforms, or the global money map with even more dramatic shifts? The answer might determine the financial future of every person watching this video.